Hello everyone, Kilpo1 here with a patch video for the Forever Winter. There's a lot of changes across the game today, and some new content, so let's go ahead and jump into our first change: water. Water has undergone another rework for its third iteration. The real-life timer has been removed, and in its stead, there is now an entry fee to maps. What this means is when you select a map on the region screen, each entry point will have a water cost. This can be from no entry cost up to mid to high single digits of water. For example, the city ruin spawn on Asha Mesa might be free, while the bunker spawn might cost 3 barrels of water. In addition to this amount seems to change during the daily reset, meaning that each map will have variable costs. The collection process of water remains the same, being found in raid, via quests, and from water bots. However, as opposed to being able to stockpile excess water, water is now converted if you were to ever go over your max reserve. This conversion either rewards experience if you are not at the experience cap, or 25,000 credits per excess water if you are at an experience cap. In addition to this, water now has a rudimentary trade system, allowing you to give water to other players via the raid screen. This seems to be primarily trade focused, able to help supply friends with water. In addition, when grouped, the entry fee is only paid by the host, allowing other players to contribute via the system. Collectively, this water rework is a good start to build up from, solving a major pain point with many players, and begins to treat water much more like a resource. It provides a foundation that takes time out of the equation so that finer tuning can take place, though it does not alleviate all issues players have had with the older system, mainly focusing on water's plentifulness and late game. Now, let's move over to weapons. Weapons have received a fairly substantial overhaul this patch, though not through balancing. The first of these being a reworking of the aim down sight's camera, now being properly aligned for most guns. There are still some niche cases where sights will be misaligned, but for the most part, first-person aiming is now usable, and beneficial over the current third-person aiming. The most impactful part of this particular change being the ability to consistently perform headshots, a superb way of covertly taking out squads. In addition to fixing sights, there are a lot of changes regarding recoil. Most guns now currently have a fairly accurate first shot, followed by an uncontrollable burst into a very controlled full auto. How accurate this full auto mode seems dependent upon the gun itself, but in many cases, this full auto is fairly accurate and requires no user input. However, in this new recoil system, third-person aiming suffers greatly, as the crosshair is no longer a good indicator on where bullets go, having to rely upon tracers and impacts. While this may not seem awful at first, some weapons have a fair amount of spread and fully automatic sustained fire, making it hard to judge where the center is. Damage-wise, only a few guns have changed, the most notable being shotguns. They received what is essentially a nerf across the board. Their advertised damage has gone down from 100 damage per pellet to 20, though its effects against infantry still seem considerable, possibly hinting at other changes behind the scenes. Regarding weapons, there are two important bugs to note. First, that you should avoid removing muzzle brakes for now, as many of the guns become unusable without one. Secondly, that aiming down sights with Massman is quirkier than other characters, having an initial left shift when you start to shoot. Collectively, it feels like once again another foundational move, getting the pieces into place to build up from. Though, I will admit it is in a very rough shape right now, and it doubles down on redundancy, making guns that were already very similar so much more so. Considering a big bottleneck seems to be the animations, I am of the opinion less guns is probably better guns. On to our next topic, awareness and AI. Awareness and AI have received another large foundational change. Enemies will begin to notice you from much farther away now, though it is slow to build up, with this build-up increasing based on distance. In addition, other sensory means are being tuned like audio, with gunshots and the aggro radius for when you're not crouched. It's hard to quantify this currently, but for the most part, speed is still your biggest friend, as it is safer to get from cover A to B quickly than to being exposed in the open for too long. This system is likely foundational also, and will likely need a lot of tuning in the future. Some special units like the Grabber can be a bit derpy at times, with close proximity still taking a while to draw its ire. However, on the plus side, random instances where units will aggro to you are mostly gone, with the only exception being the pesky drones, still occasionally shooting you out of nowhere. All in all, this seems like a fine change for now, and will probably take a while to get a good feel for how the system works. In my playtime thus far, outside of drones, I haven't really had any instances of egregious perception by the AI, outside of hunter-killers, but that's another story. This patch is also host to numerous performance and networking improvements. I personally have experienced smoother gameplay on some maps, but your performance will vary. Let me know your experiences down below in the comments. Networking-wise, I've heard it's a mixed bag, with the patch notes noting stability improvements for finding and joining matches, but issues once connected. However, this is anecdotal for now, and once again, let me know your experiences. Lastly, logging tools have been introduced or updated for networking disconnections and crashes, providing them the framework to diagnose the reasons for these issues in the future. One of the more important changes this patch is spawning, with a clear focus on reducing and removing instances of enemies spawning in front or around you. So far, I have yet to have any instances where units do either of these, which is rather refreshing. There are still instances where you can tell units spawn just around the corner, but it is much improved from them spawning around you. One thing, however, not focused on in this regard is despawning, with many units simply blinking out of existence if you move too far away. While certainly this can be a bit immersion breaking, it at least doesn't have the negative impact of killing you. Lastly, while it's still early and we're seeing the framework being put into the game, the first instances of more dynamic spawns are present, with your Asian bombers being the prime delivery method for reinforcement cyborgs on many maps. However, this is one of the few instances of this thus far, and will likely be so until we see more logistical units in the game. Collectively, this is a great step in the right direction, and just needs more time. This patch is also a content patch, introducing a new map, Stairway Gate, and a new variant, Night Shift Frozen Swamp. Stairway Gate has a very cool aesthetic, having you ascend or descend a massive stairway, illuminated by a hellish red light, giving the atmosphere of everything covered in blood. This map is fairly linear, however, and while certainly awe-inspiring, I can't help but feel like it's another cemetery or scrapyard. Very linear maps without a ton of gameplay going on. However, it could also clue us in to the intent of these maps, being primarily transit-focused, and not necessarily gameplay-focused. If there are plans for multi-map raids, I could see a map like this being the cornerstone of a system like that. Night Shift Frozen Swamp is its own beast entirely, having the dark atmosphere of Night Shift Elephant Mausoleum, and having the grim elements of Night Shift Scorched Enclave. It has a great atmosphere, and while I wouldn't say it changes the gameplay of the map all that much, it's certainly a nice aesthetic change of pace. This patch also introduces looting changes, mainly focus on new HUD elements to help loot items on the ground, and change how we interact with containers. The first of these changes is a much better UI of items on the ground, and the targeting of them. No longer will you have to wrestle around a dropped MG34 to reach a bag, or vice versa. There are also considerations on how far these elements are drawn, as to not impose too much visual clutter on the screen, though I do wish to see options in the future to adjust this. Secondly, both bags and containers now have a brief amount of time it takes to open them. In addition to this, the ability to tab select the loot all button has been removed, meaning that if one wants to loot all, it's overall a slower process now. Effectively, these changes provide a huge quality of life change to looting, while also adjusting the gameplay around it. forcing players to decide on looting containers in the open or moving on to safer areas. And while not perfectly tuned yet, it at least shows a shift toward the balancing of gameplay loops. Our last changes are a group of unrelated changes, with our first being an AI melee system overhaul. While I have not experienced too much of this firsthand, what I have noticed is that units need to be much closer now to attack you, with units like cyborgs having issues attacking fleeing characters. Along with this are several improvements to the Orgamech, providing new animations and attacks, making it a much more lethal foe, heavily focused on AoE melee. Also getting some love is Mother Courage, receiving her new one-shot kill animation, which I won't spoil here. As with all new maps, we have a variety of new quests, offering different objectives upon the Stairway map. So far, I've been able to complete most of these, with one of the more problematic ones being the Stimulants quest. However, after completing some of these quests once, I can reacquire these quests, but are unable to get the quest objectives to spawn. Lastly, there is a massive change to faction reputation, focused around attacking or killing units. Effectively, this means that doing either of these actions will quickly ruin your reputation with those factions. In its current iteration, it is severe enough that merely murdering a single squad can quickly destroy your reputation with that vendor and faction, requiring either a large sale to boost it back up, or grinding quests and killing other factions' units. While I am personally not opposed to the idea of very harsh reputation penalties, it does feel out of place currently with the quest design and aggro patterns of the AI, with many fights, even at high reputation, not usually being of my own volition. Overall, I think this patch is a serious step in the right direction. It standardizes the water system to apply equally to all players, not those who play more, and sets the groundwork for many systems to iterate and build upon. In some ways, it feels like the 6 months leading up to this patch was the early access to the early access, with us just now beginning in earnest. And while I may have my criticisms, I can't wait to see what comes next. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.